My name is Ian Guest, and I will be teaching a course on protection, human rights and conflict in the spring. I see three major learning goals for this class. The first is to understand protection and how and its implications for foreign policy, foreign relations, and of course security studies. Now, protection comes in many different shapes and sizes, and often it presents some real ethical dilemmas which are extremely interesting and very challenging. Take child soldiers. We need to protect children from being recruited, but we also need to protect the people they attack. Does this make the child soldiers victims or perpetrators? Very, very interesting and challenging policy question. Or the tension between peace and justice in countries which are recovering from conflict. So we'll look at all of that, and I hope that people come away with a really good understanding of the nature of protection. Secondly, we'll be looking at international human rights law and international humanitarian law. There's two great legal systems which are directly relevant to any study of conflict. We'll see how they've evolved through the ages and some of the pressures that are on them. I mean, they really have been put to the test, particularly in this modern era where the nature of war is changing. Thirdly, and the third main learning goal, is communications and presentations. Now, these are things that we all need in our professional lives, and what better place to test it out than in the classroom, in front of your peers. Develop a thesis, present it, see it challenged. It's the best way to learn. Well, you really only have to open a newspaper to answer that question. When you just look at what's going on in the world at the moment, there's these attacks on civilians in Afghanistan, in the Middle East, in the recent war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, the beheading of prisoners, the maltreatment of civilians across North Africa and into the Middle East. These are very, very serious developments. But we've also seen, I think, an evolution in the nature of war from interstate conflicts to the global war against terror, for example, or cyber war, which create enormous problems for international human rights and the whole concept of protection. So I do think it's a very topical and an exceptionally important issue for anybody who's interested in foreign relations and, of course, human rights. I've been teaching at MSFS for over 13 years, since 2001. I began my professional life as a journalist for The Guardian and the Herald Tribune. I then moved on to writing. I wrote a book about the disappearances in Argentina. So I've always been interested in human rights from the very beginning. I then moved into the United Nations and worked in the UN missions to Cambodia and also Haiti. I worked in Rwanda after the genocide, in Bosnia during the war. So I do have a lot of experience of these issues, first-hand experience, and a great interest in conflict and how people and institutions respond. I now direct a small non-profit here in Washington called the Advocacy Project. We support community-based organizations. We also have a fellowship program and have drawn from Georgetown University for our program. And some of these projects that we support in the field are directly relevant to this course. For example, a project in the Congo on sexual violence, another project in Mali on sexual violence. So this experience, I think, has given me some real insights into the issues, and then combine that with the academics and the teaching at Georgetown, and I think it's a useful mix. The course is going to be organized as follows. We'll start off with some reflection on that fundamental ethical challenge: when is it right to kill? And we will draw on just war theory, which remains very, very relevant centuries later. Just read President Obama's speech to the Nobel Peace Committee, very interesting. We'll then move on to a study of the evolution of human rights law and international humanitarian law, the Geneva Conventions, see how they've evolved through the years, and ask the question, have they adapted to these current circumstances? We'll look at the changing nature of war and conflict, from interstate conflict to the global war against terror, for example, or cyber war, these new and rather frightening and ill-defined conflicts. Then we'll get into a series of really interesting, challenging case studies. the use of drones and aerial warfare, impact on protection, child soldiers, as we talked about earlier, detainees and prisoners of war, how are they treated in this new era of conflict? The impact on women, particularly sexual violence and war rape. We'll look at transitional justice and the role of the International Criminal Court. So a series of really interesting, challenging case studies and issues. And we'll end up with a class on pacifism and nonviolent resistance. We'll review everything that's gone before and ask that question, you know, can we opt out of this? Do we have the luxury and indeed the right? Now, in terms of assignments, we will not have a midterm exam, which is good news for a lot of people, but everybody will be asked to make a presentation on one of these issues or a related conflict in front of class. Quite a long presentation, 30 minutes, so it'll give you a chance to develop a thesis and test it out. We'll have a final paper from you, which will review everything you've learned during the course and fit that around a subject of your choosing. And thirdly, and this is really important, we'll make good use of Blackboard during classes and after class to continue discussions online. And if any of you are social media experts, I'd love you to bring Twitter and use social media tools in the class. So there'll be those three main assignments.